In Formula One, pit stops are measured in mere seconds.
Vettel comes in for a set of hard compound tyres.
Blink, and you might miss them.
Let's have a look at it.
Teams routinely execute tire changes in around 2 seconds during a race. A lightning-fast ballet of precision. But at the 2021 Monaco Grand Prix, Mercedes and Valtteri Bottas experienced a pit stop so disastrous that it stretched on for hours rather than seconds. In fact, by the time the stubborn wheel was finally removed from Bottas's car, more than 43 hours had passed since the pit stop began. The longest pit stop in F1 history has since become legend. How could a routine tire change go so wrong that it effectively took 2 days to finish? Let's dive into the dramatic story of the pit stop that lasted 43 hours. Setting the stage, Monaco 2021 and Bottas's strong start. The Monaco Grand Prix is one of Formula One's crown jewels, a tight street circuit where overtaking is nearly impossible and every second gained or lost in the pits can decide the race. Heading into the 2021 Monaco race, Valtteri Bottas was running a strong second place for Mercedes. He had started P3 on the grid but moved up to P2 and was holding that position behind leader Max Verstappen. This was a crucial race for Bottas and Mercedes. The team was locked in a fierce championship battle with Red Bull, and Mercedes needed a podium to maintain their championship lead, which they had held since 2018. For Bottas personally, a solid result at Monaco would boost a season that had been somewhat frustrating so far. He was also outpacing his illustrious teammate Lewis Hamilton that day, as Hamilton languished down in 7th. Everything seemed on track for a valuable haul of points for Bottas, until fate intervened in the pit lane. When Bottas was called in for his first tire change on lap 30, no one could have predicted the chaos about to unfold. Monaco's pit lane is notoriously tight, but Mercedes' well-drilled crew had performed hundreds of stops under pressure. Bottas swung into his pit box for what should have been a routine stop, usually a process that takes about 1.5 to 2 seconds in modern F1. Little did they know, this pit stop would become anything but routine. The pit stop disaster unfolds. Bottas hit his marks in the pit box, or so he thought. In a perfect pit stop, the driver must stop the car within just a few centimeters of the target. Even a slight misalignment can cost precious time as mechanics adjust. In this case, Bottas stopped marginally short of the ideal position. It was a tiny difference. Later, Bottas would insist he was only 2-3 centimeters off the center, which is usually pretty spot on for an F1 pit stop. But in the high-precision world of Formula One, small errors can trigger big problems. As Bottas's Mercedes was lifted on jacks, 3 mechanics swarmed each wheel, one to remove the old tire, one to fit the new one, and one operating the pneumatic wheel gun gear. At the right front corner of Bottas's car, things went horribly wrong in a split second. Because the car was a tad out of position, the crew member holding the new front right tire crowded in slightly too close, leaving the wheel gun mechanic with too little room to work. He had to angle his wheel gun awkwardly to reach the wheel nut. Instead of the usual 45 to 60 degree angle of attack, the mechanic was forced to hold the gun almost horizontally against the nut. What happened next was every pit crew's nightmare. The wheel gun, a powerful air wrench that exerts about 4,000 newton-meters of torque, did not squarely engage the nut's teeth. The socket slipped and machined off the metal of the wheel nut's head. In an instant, the nut's hexagonal edges were ground down into a smooth circle, with all the driving faces sheared away. A puff of aluminum dust blew off the wheel as the gun whirred, a visible cloud of metal shavings that signaled the disaster unfolding. The wheel nut was now completely stripped. The front right wheel was, for all intents and purposes, welded onto the car by its own damaged nut. Inside the cockpit, Bottas could only wait and wonder why the usual green light release wasn't coming. The pit crew frantically tried the wheel gun again. The mechanic even tried switching the gun's direction repeatedly, seen as him punching the side of the gun, in a desperate attempt to loosen the mangled nut. Nothing worked. Within seconds, it was clear that the wheel was stuck fast. What should have been a routine 2-second stop had stretched to 5 seconds, 10 seconds. The clock was ticking, the race was slipping away, and still the tire refused to budge. Finally, the team had to concede defeat, at least at the track. After 30-plus seconds of futile effort, Mercedes waved the white flag. They released Bottas from the pit box without changing the tire, because it simply could not be removed. Of course, sending him out without a new tire was impossible. The old tire was half off, and the car was unsafe to drive. Bottas's race was over on the spot. Bottas was forced to retire when the team were unable to remove his front right wheel during the pit stop, one report summarized bluntly. From a comfortable P2 and a sure podium, Bottas was suddenly out of the race entirely, walking back to the garage in shock as his car was wheeled away with one tire stubbornly stuck. A 43-hour pit stop, the wheel that wouldn't come off. While the Grand Prix continued without him, Bottas's unlucky W12 car sat in the garage with the wheel still attached, a bizarre sight. The mechanics could do nothing trackside. The wheel was truly jammed on, machined to the axle by the brute force of the errant wheel gun. Mercedes would later explain that when the gun chewed up the nut, it was like stripping a screw head. There was no surface left for the tool to grip. With the race over, the team packed up the stricken car with the wheel still stuck on it and shipped it back to the Mercedes factory in Brackley, UK for surgery. The pit stop was technically still ongoing. The job of removing that wheel had yet to be completed. The clock kept ticking. Sunday turned to Monday, and still the front right tire stayed firmly in place. Finally, on Tuesday morning, 2 days after the race, Mercedes tackled the problem with heavy-duty tools at the factory. A high-powered rotary tool, a Dremel, was used to literally cut the wheel nut off the car. It was an arduous process of carefully grinding away metal without damaging the axle. At last, at around 9:59 a.m. on Tuesday, the remains of the mutilated nut gave way and the wheel was freed from the car. Mercedes even posted a video of the moment the cursed wheel finally came off, captioning it with a tongue-in-cheek, "The job's done." From the moment Bottas had stopped in the Monaco pit lane on Sunday to the moment that wheel was removed on Tuesday, approximately 43 hours had passed. What should have been a 1.5-second wheel change had turned into a 43-hour ordeal. In racing terms, that is an eternity, an eye-popping anomaly. It's no surprise that headlines around the world declared it the longest pit stop in F1 history, a dubious record for Bottas and Mercedes. The crew could finally stop the pit stop clock 43 hours late. Mercedes tweeted Riley, "Onwards and upwards from here, all eyes on Baku to come back smarter and stronger, looking ahead to the next race. Fallout, blame, and heartbreak." For Valtteri Bottas, the Monaco pit fiasco was a bitter pill to swallow. A potential podium and 18 championship points for second place had evaporated in that moment. "It took a couple of days for me to get over it," Bottas admitted afterward. This was only round 5 of the season, but the retirement dropped him a full 58 points behind championship leader Max Verstappen, a huge gap. "It's not been the best start of the season. When something like this hits you and your target was to get good points, it's disappointing," Bottas said, describing his emotions. He had been driving well, doing everything right, yet lost out through no fault of his own, a racing driver's worst nightmare. Still, ever the professional, Bottas remarked that he found ways to get through it and was keen to race again by the time the next Grand Prix came around. Within Mercedes, the incident prompted some frank discussions and a bit of controversy. Immediately after the race, team boss Toto Wolff suggested that Bottas stopping slightly off his mark was a contributing factor to the pit stop failure. "Valtteri stopped a little too early," Wolff told one interviewer, explaining that this mispositioning forced the mechanic to use the gun at an angle, which damaged the wheel nut and we couldn't get it off. Bottas, upon hearing that, was taken aback. "I was surprised to hear that," he said, maintaining that he had in fact stopped the car pretty much on target. Footage later showed Bottas's car was only a few centimeters off the ideal spot, well within normal tolerances. "I saw the video and for me it was pretty spot on where I stopped, so I was quite surprised by Wolff's comments," Bottas said, slightly puzzled that his boss would hint at driver error. The Finn chose not to press the issue with Wolff further. "Not really, we kind of left it there," he shrugged when asked if they discussed it. It was an awkward moment in an already painful episode, suggesting a hint of tension in the aftermath. Aftermath? Lessons learned and changes made. Once the dust settled and the wheel was finally removed, Mercedes switched into recovery mode. There is an old saying in F1, "Every failure is a lesson." The team immediately conducted a detailed analysis of what went wrong and why. "We had to maximize the learning from it," Bottas said, emphasizing that Mercedes dissected the incident thoroughly to ensure it would never happen again in the future. The primary culprit was clear. The design of the wheel nut allowed it to be machined off when the gun was misaligned. In other words, if the gun didn't engage perfectly, the nut's material was too soft to withstand the torque. Mercedes vowed to redesign the wheel nut and revise its materials after Monaco. "We need to review the design, we need to review the material of our wheel nut. The mechanics need to be able to do it in a way that you can't machine it off," Toto Wolff said, determined to prevent a repeat. In the following races, Mercedes indeed introduced an updated wheel nut design that was more robust. They also doubled down on pit stop practice and procedures. Epilogue, a legendary mishap and Bottas's humor. The tale of the 43-hour pit stop has since entered Formula One folklore. Fans and pundits still marvel at how such a bizarre incident could happen. A story that will be told in paddocks and pubs for years. Remember that time a wheel stuck on Bottas's car so badly they had to cut it off? It also became a sort of grim benchmark. Whenever a team has a slow pit stop now, someone might quip, well, at least it wasn't 43 hours. And that's the unforgettable story of Formula One's most bizarre and legendary pit stop. 43 hours, a stubborn wheel, and one team's relentless struggle against disaster. If you enjoyed this incredible journey behind the scenes, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell icon so you never miss another breathtaking moment. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time in the Fast Lane.